You are welcome to yet another episode of LFN What's Your Say? The leading listening show where we discuss important issues with important people like you. We are still featuring R. Kelly. Real name Robert Sylvester Kelly. Also known as the R&B King. From the very moment attorney Jennifer Bonjean stepped into the legal battlefield to defend R. Kelly, she didn't just walk into court. She walked into a storm. A storm made up of prejudice, judicial arrogance, and what appears to be a willful disregard for the law. Her mission was clear: to bring clarity, truth and legal precision to a case shrouded in controversy, media frenzy and decades of social outrage. But what she encountered was something else entirely. Bonjean, a seasoned attorney with a proven track record and a deep understanding of constitutional law, quickly discovered that she was not just arguing against prosecutors. She was arguing against a legal system that had already made up its mind. She was arguing against judges who seemed completely uninterested in what the law actually says. From the very beginning, Bonjean's role evolved beyond defending a man. She became a reluctant teacher. One tasked with reminding the Department of Justice and the courts of their own legal obligations. Her arguments weren't simply clever or passionate, they were legally sound, well-researched and rooted in established constitutional precedent. But instead of being met with respect and thoughtful engagement, she was stonewalled, dismissed and ignored. Time after time she submitted motions and appeals that exposed fundamental flaws in the charges brought against R. Kelly. Especially the charge of forced labor, RICO and the Mann Act, which were central to the prosecution's narrative. But the response from the bench was always deafening silence or curt rejection. It wasn't just that her arguments were overruled. It was that they were never even seriously considered. The courtroom she entered weren't just biased. They were allergic to accountability. And this raises the question, were these judges simply hard to teach, or were they already bought and paid to give a deaf ear? Because the pattern is too consistent to ignore. Again and again, Bonjean laid out indisputable legal facts. She pointed to misapplied statutes. She exposed contradictions in the prosecution's theories. She highlighted the unconstitutional nature of retroactive law application and the misuse of the RICO statute. Yet every time, her efforts were brushed aside, often without so much as a detailed counterargument. What does that say about the integrity of the process? Let's not forget one of the most telling moments in this entire ordeal during the New York appeal. One of the appellate judges leaned forward and asked the question that should have shattered the entire forced labor narrative. Where is the labor? It was a simple yet crucial question. A question that exposed just how paper-thin the prosecution's argument really was. Because if forced labor is the charge, then there must be evidence for labor. There must be evidence of work performed under threat, duress, or coercion. But none was ever presented. So here we are left to wonder, did that judge ever get an answer to his own question? And if he didn't, why wasn't the case dismissed right then and there? The fact that this question had to be asked at all shows the absurdity of the charges. It shows that even within the judiciary there were moments where reason tried to surface. But those moments were fleeting and the machine of corruption kept grinding on. Because clearly this wasn't about truth. This wasn't about justice. This was more about keeping R. Kelly under lock and key no matter what. And who better to challenge that machine than Jennifer Bonjean? Every courtroom she entered, she brought with her the law in its purest form. She wasn't there to pander to public opinion or play media games. She was there to apply the law as it's written. But she quickly learned that in this case the law didn't matter. Not to the judges, not to the prosecutors and not to the system that was hell-bent on destroying R. Kelly. In fact, this wasn't a legal proceeding but a show trial. Bonjean tried to hold the courts accountable. She tried to restore the principle that even unpopular defendants deserve a fair trial, but time after time, she was met with the same wall of judicial resistance. It was as if the courtroom had become a stage and the script had already been written. And R. Kelly's guilt was the final act no matter what the evidence said. Let's be honest, the refusal to engage with Bonjean's arguments is not just negligence. It's judicial malpractice. When judges refuse to address legal arguments, especially the ones as fundamental as the existence of labor in a forced labor case, it's no longer about the law. It's about power. It's about narrative. It's about punishment at all costs. And that's not justice. That's vengeance dressed in a judicial robe. But Bonjean did not back down. She filed motion after motion. She stood her ground in hostile courtrooms. She forced the courts to at least pretend to listen. And every time they brushed her off, she made it harder for them to deny their own corruption. Because the public was watching. And more importantly, history was being written. Let us not underestimate what it means when a federal judge asks, "Where is the labor?" That's not a minor detail. That's the heart of the matter. And the prosecution had no answer because there was no labor. There were no contracts. No forced hours. No quotas. No threat of punishment for not working. What existed were personal relationships, often messy and sometimes toxic, but not criminal under the definition of forced labor. So why did the courts ignore this? Why was this foundational flaw never addressed? Why did Bonjean's legally grounded arguments fall on deaf ears? The answer may be as chilling as it is simple, because this was never about justice. This was about setting an example. About destroying a man who had become too powerful, too unfiltered and too controversial. The courts didn't want to hear the truth because they wanted to protect the narrative. But Bonjean kept pushing. She showed that forced labor charges were being weaponized in a way that makes a mockery of the actual statute. She demonstrated that the DOJ's interpretation of the law was not only flawed but dangerous. Because if this precedent is allowed to stand, then anyone in a personal relationship could be accused of forced labor if a breakup turns bitter. That's not just unjust. That's terrifying. But still the judges ignored her. They ignored the Constitution. They ignored common sense. And they ignored the very laws they swore to uphold. And so we return to the original question, are they simply hard to teach, or is there something far more sinister going on? Because no reasonable court acting in good faith could look at Bonjean's arguments and dismiss them so casually. No honest judge would brush aside a question as essential as where is the labor? Unless they were protecting something or someone. This case isn't just about R. Kelly. It's about the health of our legal system. It's about whether defense attorneys can still get a fair hearing. It's about whether the law is still the law or just a tool to punish the unpopular. Jennifer Bonjean is more than just a defense attorney. She's a mirror being held up to the face of American justice. And what we see in that reflection is disturbing. A justice system that doesn't want to be taught the law. Judges who have traded integrity for influence. And a Department of Justice more concerned with winning headlines than following the law. In the end, Bonjean may not be able to convince these judges. They may remain proudly hard to teach. But her arguments have not been in vain because the people are starting to listen. The inconsistencies are becoming harder to ignore. And the truth is slowly but surely beginning to surface. So we ask again, and we ask loudly this time. Where is the labor? Until someone can answer that question, this case remains a lie. And Jennifer Bonjean remains one of the few voices brave enough to say so. Thank you for watching today's video, a production of LFN Media, giving you another perspective of issues at hand. We make it our business to keep you updated with the truth amidst the cloud of lies the media wants you to believe. It is therefore important to subscribe to this channel, hit the bell icon and allow all notifications so that you don't miss out whenever we publish a new video.